Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to dive into a topic that I get asked about all the time: using references when sketching. I'm sure a lot of you have wondered whether or not it's okay to use references, or maybe even feel like it's cheating. So today, I'm going to break down when and why I use references in sketching, how to do it effectively, and clear up some of the misconceptions about it. First off, do I always use references? The answer is, it depends. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. It all depends on what I'm trying to accomplish in that particular session. If I'm working on something that's to be shared or published, like an illustration I want to post on social media or include in a portfolio, then I'll usually use references to help get my structures or my anatomy correct. But if I'm just sketching for fun or warming up, like most of these sketching sessions are, I tend to rely on references a lot less. In those sessions, I'm not really worried about precision. I'm more focusing on loosening up and letting my creativity flow. As I mentioned before, you should approach your sketching session without expectations. It should be more of a relaxing and meditative experience. Now, that said, there are times when I decide to use references during a sketching session. That's usually for one of two reasons. The first is simply to get started. If you've ever sat down to a blank page and felt completely stuck, you know exactly what I mean. That blank canvas can feel pretty damn intimidating. Writer's block doesn't just happen to writers. Artists can get stuck just as easily. In those moments, I'll grab a reference, usually a pose or two, and just start sketching. It's kind of like stretching before a workout. You warm up your hand, get the creative juices flowing, and by the time you hit the third pose or so, I find I'm usually ready to switch back to freehand sketching. The reference helps me get past that initial block. The first two poses were from references that I found online. This helped me get my session going, and then I was able to fill out the rest of the page with my own thoughts and explorations. The second reason is when I'm sketching something unfamiliar. Let's say I'm drawing an animal I've never drawn before, or I'm trying to nail a specific angle in a dynamic pose. I'll use reference to guide me, but even then, it's more of a jumping off point rather than a strict guide that I'm going to be sticking with during the entire sketching. I'll tweak things, exaggerate elements, and make it up as I go. Usually, the reference in this case is meant for getting the gesture down or the general shapes down. It's not for me to get a perfect drawing, but for me to get over the hump of trying to nail down a subject to the point where my creativity can take over. I want to address something that I see a lot of newer artists getting hung up on. This idea that using references is somehow cheating. Spoiler alert, it's not. Using references is not cheating. In fact, references are one of the best tools you can use as an artist. The old masters like Michelangelo, Da Vinci, they use references all the time. And they weren't just copying. They were observing the world around them and using those observations to enhance their own work. In my opinion, it's perfectly fine to use references, even during a casual sketching session. Sometimes we need a bit of guidance to get our ideas down, and there's nothing wrong with that. The key is how you use them. The goal isn't to copy the reference exactly, but to understand the shapes, the forms, and the structure so you can improve your drawing. One thing that I see a lot of people overlook is the importance of building a technical foundation before you try to freehand everything. Think of it this way. You can't run before you walk. Freehand sketching effectively requires a solid understanding of shapes, anatomy, and form, and so many things. Without that knowledge, you're limiting yourself in terms of what you can draw and how accurate your drawings are going to be when you're thinking about what you're trying to accomplish. This is where references come in handy. By using them, you're training your eye to break down complex forms into simpler shapes. That's an essential skill if you want to reach a point where you can freehand anything confidently. Now, while I think references are an incredible tool, I do want to caution against one thing: tracing. A lot of people think tracing is the same as using references, but it's really not. When you trace, you're not developing the skills you need to see and understand shapes, anatomy, and perspective on your own. Tracing can be a shortcut, sure, but it's a shortcut that holds you back in the long run. You miss out on training your visual memory and your ability to break down complex objects. When you use a reference properly, you're observing the subject and mentally deconstructing it into simpler forms. You're developing the ability to see in 3D and translate that into your 2D canvas. That's a skill you'll need whether you're drawing from reference or freehand. So, my recommendation is to avoid tracing. Instead, challenge yourself to really engage with your references and think critically about what you're drawing. So, let's talk about how to use references effectively. First off, if you're using references that are heavily featured in your final work, especially if you're using stock pose providers like the Pose Archive, it's always a good practice to give credit where it's due. It's a common courtesy and it keeps everything above board. Sometimes that's not possible. In this particular case, I'm using references for the first two poses that I found on Pinterest, and these were pictures of people wearing athletic leisure wear for advertising. So it wasn't very possible to credit the models in those particular cases. However, in most cases, when you're doing like a full illustration and you're using stock photography or pose providers, again, like the Pose Archive or others like that, Senshi Stock is another great one. In those particular cases, it'd be great to give credit somewhere along the line. I know when it comes to print, that's not always possible, but sharing your illustrations online, it's always great to maybe just reference that person, tag that person in your post. Another tip is to keep your references as close to your drawing area as possible. When I'm drawing on my tablet, I usually load up reference images on my phone. That way, my drawing screen stays clutter-free and I can quickly glance at my phone when I need to check the reference. Some apps allow you to import references directly onto your canvas, which is also a great option. The goal is to make sure you're not constantly shifting your focus or reorienting yourself, thereby losing your place and losing your proportions and having to spend all that extra time trying to understand what you were trying to draw in the first place. Keeping your references close to your drawing area ensures that you keep your drawing flow going. One of the most important questions I get is, where do you find your references? And for me, the answer is simple: Pinterest. Pinterest is hands down the best visual search engine out there. A lot of people think Pinterest is a place for home decor or fashion inspiration, but it's also an amazing resource for artists. I have boards for poses, anatomy, costume ideas, vehicles, you name it. It's also great for organizing your references. You can pin everything in one place and come back to it whenever you need it. When I began this drawing session, I didn't have to waste time performing a search. I just opened up Pinterest, went to my pose pin board, and did a quick scroll and just started sketching. I definitely recommend giving Pinterest a try if you're not already using it. So, to wrap this up, don't be afraid to use references. Whether you're warming up, working through a creative block, or trying to nail a difficult pose, references are a great tool that can help you improve your art. Just remember, the goal isn't to copy, it's to learn. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos on digital art. Until next time, keep drawing.